Welcome to the online tutorial for the Fishbourne Pinafore. We're going to start by doing the darts. So we've got a dart on the front bodice and on the back bodice. I've drawn them in pen so that I can see clearly which one corresponds to the size I'm making today. So let's unpin the pattern, and then you can see I've chosen to do little nicks for marking the bottom and a pin for the top. This pin goes all the way through all the layers, and I'm just going to transfer that onto that side as well. And then I'm going to push that right in, and then that will pull off nice and cleanly. You can use a chalk pencil or an erasable pen to mark the lines on for your dart if you want to. I'm just going to fold and match those little notches there and line up that pin so that I know where to stop. And then I'm just going to put a couple of pins in to secure it, starting at that end. So there we go, starting at the broad end, and we're moving towards the pin and tapering off to that point where the pin was. There we go, that's one dart. And there's the other one. So now all you need to do is press these one way. I'm going to press them towards my side seams. There we go. Job done. Next we're going to do the bust dart. So again, I've marked it in green pen and I've put a pin at the end there and put little nicks in the fabric this end. Let's open it out, fold the fabric in half so that those little notches match up and that the pin is right on the fold. There we go. I'm going to stitch again from the broad end and taper off towards the pin. So I've done that on both sides. I'm going to press these downwards. There we go, 2 bust darts. So next we're going to do the shoulder seams. That's my front, right side up, and then that's my back, right side down. You'll notice the shoulder seams are angled, so match up the raw edges and pop a pin in. And we're going to stitch a centimetre from the raw edge. All seam allowances on my patterns are a centimetre unless otherwise stated in the instructions. There we go, both shoulders stitched. I'm just going to open up that seam now and give it a press. There we go. Let's have a look at it from the right side. Now we're going to prep the facing. So you've got 2 facing pieces, one the back facing and the front facing. They're both cut to the fold. Let's open these out. You can see I've interfaced the wrong side of these pieces just to stop them distorting or stretching when we're sewing them. Again, you've got those angles on the shoulder seams, so we're going to match them up and stitch as we did for the bodice. There we go. That's the centimetre seam allowance again. They were stitched right sides together, and we're going to press that seam open again. So now we're going to stitch the facing to the neckline. You might want to put a stay stitch around your neckline before you start, which is just an ordinary stitch within the 1 centimetre seam allowance, just to stop it from stretching when you're sewing your facing on. Now you can see I've marked my corners on my facing, And literally I've just taken my tape measure, measured my centimetre seam allowance and done a chalk mark. This stops you kind of overshooting or getting funny angles on your nice square neckline. So we're just going to match these edges up and pin the corners. This is my front neckline that I'm doing at the moment, and I'm going to match these seam lines now too. The front neckline is deeper than the back. So right sides together, pinning as you go. Match up the raw edges, keep them lined up. Plenty of pins. Okay, so I'm going to start stitching from the shoulder, back tack, centimetre seam allowance all the way around till I get back to where I started, and then back tack again. So a nice easy neckline because it's all straight lines, and I've got my corners marked so I can see exactly where my needle wants to go down, and then I can lift my foot and pivot to get a really nice sharp corner. Okay, so we've stitched all around, and now I'm just going to trim off these little bits of seam allowance off the end of the shoulders here, just clipping those off. And then I'm going to clip into the corners, so be super careful, don't go too far. Definitely clip right into the corner as far as you can, but leave that little sort of 1mm of fabric before the stitch line. There we go. Then I'm going to trim down my facing side of my seam allowance around the neck, just trimming it to half, make it a little bit less bulky. Again, that's nice and easy because it's all straight lines. So there we go, it's all trimmed and ready. And now I'm going to fold my facing over with my seam allowance pointing up. I'm going to fold my facing over on top of my seam allowance and stitch right on the edge. Let me show you that a bit closer. So stitching right on the edge of the facing there. Do give it a press first. If you're a newbie, that will make it much easier to get everything lying flat. And I'm just starting, and I'm doing this stitching from corner to corner. So I'm not trying to go around the corners and do it all in one go. I'm just stopping and starting in between the corners. There we go. So I'm going to come off because I've got to a corner there, and I'm just turning my work around. Make sure my seam allowance is tucked under my facing, and I'm stitching through all the layers right on the edge. So there we go. You can see the two lines of stitching there, the one holding the facing on and the one holding the seam allowance down to the facing. So then we just tuck that in, and it should all line really nicely ready for pressing. So here we go. There you go. It lays out really nicely, and that facing holds the neckline nicely now. Give that a quick press. There we go. That's our facing attached around the neckline. Okay, so next we are going to bag out our armholes, and we're going to use the burrito method. So you want to lay your bodice out like so, and then you're going to open up that's one side, and then you're going to roll the other side into it. So what you've got there is your facing on one side and your bodice on the other, and that is your armhole seam. So let's fold it over to match it. So that's your shoulder to shoulder seam. So make sure you tuck all that right in so that you're not going to stitch over it, and stitch it into your armhole seam. And then just work your way around, pinning your facing armhole to your bodice armhole. Again, tuck that in nicely so it's well away from your seam allowance. And then you need to stitch all the way around your armhole. Again, a centimetre seam allowance for this. Back tack to start, follow the curve round nicely. Ever so careful as you get to the shoulder that you're not stitching over what's in there. And back tack to finish. Okay, so let's take out these last pins. We're going to trim this seam allowance down again like we did before, just the little corners. Take those off. And then I'm going to trim this facing side down of my seam allowance to half again. And then I'm going to snip into the curves every couple of centimetres or so, just to allow the fabric to form a nice curve when we turn it through. Get rid of all these scrabbly bits. Now, the moment of truth. Now we go into the bit we've just sewn and pull the fabric through, all the way through. And there you go, as if by magic, it's been sewn. That's our open one. This is our sewn one. And you just need to do what we did before with the edge stitching and just push that seam allowance up towards the facing, and we're going to stitch it down really close to the edge on the right side. We won't be able to go right up to the shoulder seam, but just take the stitching as far as you comfortably can on each side. So I'm pulling that seam allowance behind the facing again, stitching it down close to the edge, and then once I get to the point where I can't really comfortably go any further, I'll just back tack and start again on the other side. So there we go, that's now edge stitched nicely. You can see again the 2 rows of stitching there. I'm just going to give that a quick press, and there we go, that's one side done. It's exactly the same process for the other side. So bodice seams next. You'll notice I've overlocked the edge of my facing and I've overlocked the side seam here to neaten it before I start. So I'm taking my seam there, right sides together, I'm matching where the facing joins the bodice, putting a pin in. And I'm simply going to sew from the underarm on the facing end, back tack, centimetre seam allowance again, and then stop. There we go. Open that seam, give it a press. Now I'm going to stitch this facing down. I'm going to use this seam here and I'm going to stitch in the ditch. I'm going to stitch right between the back and front bodice at the side seam just to secure that facing down so it doesn't flap around. You can top stitch it all the way around if you want, but there you go. It doesn't show on the right side, but you can see it's secured down on the wrong side. Let's have a look at it from the right side out. That's it, one side seam. So now if you fancy putting pockets in, we're going to do that next. So we've got our skirt front and back, which are the same. Got a notch there that matches the notch on the pocket, and there's another notch down here. I've also marked where my centre front or centre back is. That will be useful when we do the gathering later. So we're going to open out our skirt panel. We're taking them one at a time. We've got 2 pairs of pocket bags, so we're going to take one pair, open them out, and we're going to face, oh, there's our notch for our pocket and our skirt, so we're going to put right sides together and make sure your pocket is facing down and pin that, and then we're going to do it on the other side as well. There's my skirt notch, there's my pocket notch, match those up, pop a couple of pins in, and I'm going to stitch that down 1 centimetre seam allowance again, so just stitching the pocket to the skirt. There we go, there's 2 pockets stitched on. Now I'm going to just overlock or zigzag over that edge, literally just where the pocket bag is attached, and then I'm going to lay my pocket bag over my seam allowance and give it a press and then edge stitch it again. So I've got the seam allowance laying under my pocket bag and I'm just stitching on the edge of the pocket bag to secure that seam allowance to it. There we go, that's 1, that's 2. Give you a little close-up of the stitching. So you can see the stitching's on the pocket bag side, not the skirt side. Okay, so now we're going to stitch the side seams. So we want one of our skirt front and backs right side up and one right side down. Match up your raw edges, starting at the waist, pin. Make sure those seams are together. Carefully matching at the bottom of the pocket too. And then we're going to pin the rest of the seam down to the hem. There we go. So starting at the waist, we're going to back tack to start, come down to this point, and we're going to stitch 1 stitch up towards the skirt side, all the way around the pocket, and then again 1 stitch towards the skirt side over that seam, and then stitch all the way down to the bottom. So here we go. When I get to that pocket stitch line, I'm making sure I am 1 stitch to the skirt side of that seam line, and then I'm pivoting, coming all the way around the pocket, and I'm going to do exactly the same at the bottom edge of the pocket. I'm going to stitch until I get 1 centimetre, 1 stitch past that seam line, and then pivot and then stitch to the hem. Okay, so I'll show you that close up now. So you can see that's my stitch line, that's my pocket stitch line, and I've literally come just 1 stitch to the skirt side of that and I've done the same at the bottom. So I'm now just going to overlock all around the outside. Oh, cut that straggler off. So that's all neatened. Let's look at that from the right side. So I can put my hand in the pocket there, and I'm going to press this seam allowance this way and give it a press so my pocket is under there, so that will be my front. There we go. So you can see I've pressed my seam allowance that way, and that's the way my pocket lies. So that top piece is now my front. So next we're going to put some gathering threads in the top of this skirt. So let me just recap on the pocket situation. These are my pockets, and you can see they're both facing those seams as well, facing towards the front. They're all facing towards that front panel. So this is my front. So I'm going to make that really obvious so I can't get it wrong with a nice big safety pin. That's my centre front little snip. So I'm going to put a safety pin in there so that reminds me that's now my front and that one is my back. Now I'm going to start at the side seams, and I'm going to use my stitch length on 5, and I'm going to stitch one row from side seam to side seam, and then I'm going to stitch a second one, and then I'm going to do the same on the back of my skirt too. So here we go. This is stitch length 5, and I'm stitching 1 centimetre in from the raw edge at the top of my skirt. I'm stopping at the side seam. Then I'm going back, and I'm going to stitch another row halfway between the stitch that I've just done and the raw edge. And these are going to be my gathering threads. I recommend using a synthetic thread for this, not a cotton, as it can snap quite easily. There we go, 2 rows of stitching that are going to be my gathering threads. So now we're going to gather up the skirt to attach it to the bodice. Okay, so remember my pockets are going inwards, so that's my front. I've got my pin there to show me and remind me. So this is my front bodice that I've got here. You can tell because it's got the dart in it there at the side seam. And I'm going to fold this in half to find the centre front. Seams together. That's my centre front, so I'm going to match that to the centre front of my front skirt. Pop a pin in. And I'm going to match side seams, remembering that the skirt side seams need to point towards the front. And then I'm going to match the centre backs. So tuck that in. Oh, I've got a little snip there for the centre back. And one there. So I'm going to match those together, pop a pin in. There we go. Okay, so we've got the skirt and the bodice in our quarters. And now you just need to find your loose ends to gather up your gathering stitch. Always use the bobbin side to gather with to pull up, so it will slide more easily than the other side, than the top thread. And just take your time to do it. Ease it gently along. In my days of bridal wear, I used to use buttonhole thread for the bobbin for gathering up, because there would just be copious amounts of silk and things to gather, and it's not the smoothest fabric to gather silk, so yeah, that would be the best way for me so that I didn't end up snapping my threads. There we go, just easing those gathers along until the skirt is the same length as the bodice, and then you can pin them together and just even out your gathers as you go. There we go. That's one side. And then I'll work backwards towards the side seam on the other side. And that's my front done. So same process for the back. Okay, so now it's all pinned. I'm going to stitch from the side seam all the way around, and I've got the gathers on top as I stitch so that I can see that there's no puckers or any fabric got caught up in the seam that shouldn't be. I got much more control over the gathering if I've got that facing up. Okay, so we've stitched all the way around. Take out any pins that are left, and I'm going to overlock this to neaten it now. There we go, much neater. Let's turn it through and have a look. Excuse me while I shake it out. There we go. And you can see I've still got my safety pin there to show me it's the front. Now I'm just going to cut away these loose threads, and I'm going to give that a little steam. There we go. Job done. So all you've got left now is the hem. Here's mine. I've overlocked mine because I'm just going to turn it up and stitch it, but you could do a turn and turn depending what fabric you've got, what hem allowance you've got for you, how long you want it, but I'm just going to turn it and stitch it today. So there we are, I've stitched all the way around. Let's just trim away any threads, and then it just needs a press. And that's our last process. So there you go, nice crisp hem. So this is it. This is what you should have. You've got armholes, the bodice, the darts, the gathers, the two pockets pointing the right way, and a lovely hem. So hopefully yours looks exactly like this. Enjoy.